Hey TK.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Cameron. How are you?
I'm really well, mate. Have you been enjoying the punt lately?
Well, I'm enjoying it. It's not very profitable, but it's still fun.
I backed 3 Ood on Saturday at
Oh,
20s and still lost on the day. So I know how you feel.
yeah. I had a similar one. I backed Grandview Terrace at 10-1 and still lost about $100, I think.
Yeah. It
And
Yeah.
I have no idea what either of you are talking about, but I did, in preparation and research for this, get up early this morning and watch the Tyson fight. I thought that's what we'd be talking about.
The Tyson fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, did you? You recorded? It was on yesterday. Yeah.
I watched a YouTube.
Yeah.
Of it.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Look, what did you think? I,
I'm glad it wasn't me in the ring with Tyson. That's all. I mean, he might be 54 and slow, but Jesus, when he threw punches, I felt it, man, just even watching it.
Both of them have still got some hand speed, and clearly no investment, no interest in hurting each other.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, mate, Google some street stuff of Tyson shadowboxing for fans. It's
Really?
awesomely scary. Awesomely scary.
Man, even the speed, I expected him to punch hard, but a few times, even in like round 3 or 4, he just came out a few times and there was just this flurry of fists going. And I was like, holy shit, that's terrifying.
Yes, yeah. Well, I had the great fortune of going to cover his unification fights, and met Muhammad Ali, which was like the biggest thing in my life at that time, and still is the only autograph I've ever asked for, I think. But I met a girl there who was the sister of a guy sparring with Tyson, and she got me up into his room at the MGM, and I had an interview that went kind of around the world with him, where he said for the first time, I'm sure he said it since, that he used to because class doesn't treat me like a person, and that I'm only 19, and he said, you're so young, how did you get this job? I'm sounding more like Michael Jackson, but he had this strange lisp, and he sounded so young. He was 19, but he admitted then that he pulls on a ski mask and goes down to Brownsville and mugs people because it makes him feel centered. So he was a heavyweight champion of the world, saying that he goes back home and mugs people and anonymously just because that feels normal.
Wow.
Holy shit. So when was that?
That was 1987, March of 1987.
Holy shit. How old were you?
24.
Wow. That must have been mind-blowing.
Oh, it really was. It really was. And to see the closeted world that they live in, and I've seen other examples of it since, but I'd never been to America before, so I hadn't seen all of these great stars and the way they're treated. But he was just the fat pig that they kept feeding, nurturing, protecting, guarding. It's no way to live. And it's funny, he keeps saying he feels like he's lucky to be alive. I think he was completely depressed through most of his life. Yeah.
And you got to meet Ali, you said?
Yes, I did. It was such a great trip because Crocodile Dundee was pretty fresh in people's minds over there. And a fellow heard me checking in at the hotel, and he had the big Stetson on and the full cowboy, rhinestone cowboy Glenn Campbell look. And he had a framed, signed Muhammad Ali photograph with gloves and stuff that went with it. And he said, do you want to make some money? And I'm immediately suspicious. And he said, just talk to me the way you talk normally. So, of course, I was bunging on a real Australian accent, mate, a bit of rhyming slang, never did anybody any harm. And we just had this conversation and people gathered round. And he sold that thing for over 12,000 US in about 10 minutes with a big crowd around us. Just someone came in and paid cash for it. So he slung me a couple of $100 and, that was the start of it all. That's when I met this girl called Desiree, who was Tyson's sparring partner's sister.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who does that. Whenever I go over to the US to hang out with Chrissy's family, I'm always putting it on like that, mate. Yeah, the accent gets really... She goes, oh, will you just stop that? You're embarrassing me. They love it over here.
Well, they do. They do. I don't think it carries as much cachet as it used to. But Hoax did us all a favour for about 10 years.
Yeah, well, I scored an American wife out of it, so I'm grateful. You know.
Yeah, I know. She probably thinks you're some frontiersman still.
Still, yeah. I'm getting back into it one of these days.
Well, we're in America around that same time, and people would walk up and say, "God, I."
Yeah.
Like, pardon? What? talking to me? What was that?
God, mate.
God, I might. Yeah.
Well, welcome to the QAV show, Cameron Williams. How is your Monday morning been going? You're back at home already. You've done your stint for the day, or do you have to go back in?
No, I have to go back in, and the last hour or so has left me a bit sweaty because I couldn't find our damned, what's it called, the elf on a shelf, which you don't have for young enough kids, but the elf on the shelf reappears on the 1st of December every year and then disappears after Christmas. And he's in a different position every time that they wake up, the kids wake up. And I thought I'd lost Cookie, the elf on the shelf. I found it.
But it was found. Oh, that's good.
Christmas is Day.
Thought you were talking about the VHS of the Will Ferrell film or something. Or maybe your private name for Little Cameron or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
So why don't we we'll get into investing and money stuff, but let's give people your background story, because most people probably haven't heard it. I suspect you grew up not far from where I grew up, right? Country Queensland.
That's exactly right. Emerald in central Queensland, which these days is a orcharding area because they've got a very big dam there and a regular water supply. But my father was there building that. He was an engineer on the roadworks and the bridges approaching Fairburn Dam, as it was called then. And I guess I'm a product of that kind of youth. I like horses, I like outdoors, and I moved not long after I was born to Rockhampton, which is just another bigger central Queensland town. And there I discovered the coast and swimming and stuff like that. But I always graduated towards communication type studies, and communication type areas of my life have developed in a business sense, because I started at the Courier Mail as a cadet writing for them, and quickly realised that I wanted to write about sport. That led to a job at the Australian in Melbourne. That led to television jobs in Sydney predominantly. And now I'm the sports editor at Channel 9. And we've just completed a big move from the original home of TV in Australia. 1956 was in Willoughby. And we've just left those Willoughby studios behind, which is a bit sad. But we're now at a brand new digs in 1 Denison Street, North Sydney. And that's got its teething problems, but it's a great building and we're enjoying being there.
Wow. Yeah, I've been to the Willoughby studios and to Emerald. I was working there in the 90s. I think I was there trying to help our fuel distributor. I was working for Shell, and it was year 4 of a 5-year drought. So I hope the Fairbairn Dam has turned things around, because it was tough making money in the tail end of a drought after 4 years.
When it gets dry out there, Tony, it gets just cruelly dry. And the river that goes through town is called the Nagoa. And it's usually a no-goer, because it's often very dry. And the Shell rep in town in Emerald in the 60s, I was born in 1963, was a guy called Georgie Pole. And I'll never forget him, because he had a thumb amputated in a machinery accident. But my mum and dad told me that he sucked his thumb when he was a boy. So Shell and what do you call it? I guess deterrents for children are interlinked for me. So nice town though. Our phone number out there was 360. So small place, but it was a great place to grow up. Lots of space. You could have a horse. You could have keep birds and things. People were good. You could go to anyone's door. It was a great place to grow up.
You still got family there?
No, we all moved. my mum, we moved to Rockhampton first of all, and then to Brisbane. And my dad died this time last year, but my mum is still in Brisbane, and she's got a lovely house in Kangaroo Point on the river there. And she's the start of my investment career, because right from the first time I earned $1, she said, "You've got to start investing this in property." And I've always been a bit of a share naysayer up until recently. And Tony, you're the bloke who convinced me otherwise. And I've always treated my property investments as investments and the share market as a kind of gambling den.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only now that I've realised how much easier it is to keep yourself organised in the share market and manage a portfolio of shares and still get growth and dividends. It's just that, do what you trust. I trusted bricks and mortar, and it's done reasonably well for me. But I've got rid of some of those investments to go heavily into the share market these days.
Yeah, good for you. But it's a good perspective to bring to share market investing, I think, if you've had that property experience, because as you know, you can't check the price of the house every day. You can't sell it tomorrow if you don't like it. You can't buy it back the day after. So I think that's a good, really good training ground and perspective to bring to the share market too.
Yes, and there's lots of traps and pitfalls, and it's more difficult to manage at arm's length than you might expect.
Mm-hmm.
I don't regret any of it, because over time, if you're patient in the property market and you don't buy silly investments like at Robina at the Gold Coast, where I did buy one place, but generally they've been slow producers, and I guess it's been my forced method of saving. I've always been a bloke who, on one hand, I do like gambling on the horses like you do. I've got a gambling streak, but I like to know that I own the bricks that I live in. I'd rather have the bricks than the furniture, and did sleep on the floor a lot as a young worker, but there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Your rewards later. You don't think you'll ever get old when you start out, but it happens soon enough.
Yeah, I'm the same. I owned an investment property with a mate to start off with, and I remember going in there after work, completely buggered, putting up trestles, painting the inside of the house until 1 or 2 in the morning, packing it all up again and going back to bed for a few hours on the floor and then going into work. So yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah, it's hard work, but good training. Training. And I certainly had no specific skills that I wasn't always going to be a doctor or a pilot or a bricklayer. I didn't have any specific training, so I always knew that I was going to have to be careful early on with whatever money I had, and it's been productive. So I love that about your method. That day that you explained compounding interest and the savings that you can make by going to a public school rather than a private school, it cemented my belief that QAV and your way to go is the way to go. I've told this to Cambo already, but my primary driver for being involved with you guys is that so that I can teach the method to my children, mm-hmm. and to manage what wealth I've got in an easy, fairly as hands-on as you want it to be, but it's a low risk, low input method of making sure that you're getting a good return for your savings or your investments. And I got lucky a year or so ago. Can I tell you a quick investing story?
Please.
I overheard a conversation on a plane from Perth to Sydney, and I heard this fellow. One of the things that cut through the conversation, because I was trying to sleep, he said he'd just sold his gold mine, and that he was going to take a year off and travel the world and find out what his new investment was going to be. And I thought, God, I'd like to do that. Yeah, I've just sold my gold mine. Anyway, so I listened in more carefully and just got whatever snatches of the conversation that I could. And I noticed that he had a bit of a speech habit of saying new instead of new. But he was an Australian guy, and I thought that was a bit unusual. I wonder where he picked that up. I thought he must have lived in America or something. Anyway, must be 2 years later, about 2010 or 2011, I heard a guy speaking on the radio about graphite. Mm-hmm. Now, I had no interest in graphite, but he kept saying, he was an Australian guy, kept saying new. So I worked out this guy was a fellow called Mark Thompson, and that he'd sold a gold mine, and he'd traveled the world, and he decided that he was going to buy at a very cheap price a graphite resource in Sweden. And to cut the long story short, it's called Tauga Group. They've firmed up a very, very high grade graphite and graphene resource. They've partnered with Oxford University, Germany, Sweden. They've got very, very green, low cost power from Sweden. They've got factories being built in Germany with German input and money. They won the Faraday Challenge, and they build the anodes for batteries, and they own the resource. They own the IP for how to turn that into an anode. They own all of these very high, substantially difficult things to copy. There's the moat that you talk about, and slowly the market's picking it up. So I'm in at an average of about 27, 28 cents, and they're now up to over $2. So this is my Facebook, and it's been a winner for me. But I haven't sold any. When I do sell some, Tony, everything I've got is going to be invested QAV forever, because that's the way to stay safe.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's really nice to know. And good luck with the graphene. I know graphite went through a bit of a boom and then a bust probably in the last sort of 3 or 4 years. There's lots of new mines coming on, but it's turning around a bit now, I think. Yeah,
and it's not a graphite play. It's an anode producer play.
Right, okay. Yep.
They own their own resource, and it's high quality, and it requires a lot less input chemically and in terms of heat to transform it into the product they need. So all the big manufacturers like CATL, they spend hundreds and hundreds of kilowatts of energy producing their anode material. This is green. It's European has legislated supply chains that have to be green. They have to be sourced from Europe. They're the first mover and really the only ones that are in this position so far. They've had connections, we believe, with Tesla, and that's my punt.
Yeah, good. And
you've got to believe in something.
Yeah, following a tip, hey, or your own tip, I guess.
Yeah, well, I stumbled on it myself, but because I was very interested in him, and I know you're not into the charisma of these guys because they are all salesmen, but he was not selling anything to anyone. He was just speaking about what he wanted to do, and he obviously had a high grade brain, and I just thought that I'd learn as much about him and his company as I could, and I've just kept adding to it.
Yeah, that's good. So it was you reminded me, Cam, of just a play that I've done before in the past. If you can find people who've done successful out of one mine and they'll sell out and they'll pop up in another mine and it's early stages and it'll be cheap, and it's worthwhile following them in some, a lot of instances. I mean, Twiggy Forrest at Fortescue Metals, that wasn't his first investment. A guy called Kerry Hamidis, I think his name was, with a company called Jubilee Mines, was one of my best investments in the past. And he's now popped up in some other things. So yeah, you're following the money. These guys are really good at what they do, and when they come back, it can be a good investment.
Chris Ellison's another one with Mineral Resources.
Right. Yeah. Good.
So,
well, that's great.
But you're our charismatic guy.
No, I'm not.
I went to that dinner that we had in the Cross, the first one, and you mentioned that Credit Corp had. Which was taking a bath at the time because of COVID, had done that before, and that you had snapped it up before. So I tucked away a bit of that without applying the QAV principles, just applying I believe in Tony Kynaston principle, and that's done well. Yeah,
it's been good. I bought some too.
Yeah,
it's a good company. Oh, that's great. So getting back to your kids, how old are your kids?
Archie is 12, going on 12, and Remy is 8. So okay. I failed to get them completely interested in money and where it comes from and how difficult it is to make yet. But this is the year that I've bought them a little ETF. Their savings were enough to justify buying an ETF. We decided that we were going to invest in Asia as an emerging collection of nations, and there's an ETF called IEM, and they're up 15% on their money.
Good. And I understand what that means?
No, yeah, okay. It's completely unreal to them. It's just numbers. It doesn't mean anything to them, but I am starting to get them to think of companies as businesses.
Yep.
And to tell me why they like products. You know, they like Apple products. They like the iPad that they play with. And I said, what do you like about it? And what don't you like about other iPads? And would you buy from this company and not that company? So they're starting to think about companies as living organisms that you can own a chunk of.
Oh, that's a great way of doing it. And your oldest might be getting close to job employment age too, which is another big step, I think. Get them a job.
Yeah, look,
Teach them the value of money. Yeah,
you know, that kind of McDonald's experience, I think, is invaluable. And you know, it's just interesting. I think that I think, Cam, you've been very successful in bringing out the entrepreneur in your kids, and it's just a matter of, you know, because young kids come to me all the time and say, how can I get into, you know, a position in television? Where's it all going? And the honest answer is it's changing very quickly. I don't know where it's all going, but I just tell them, if you've got a belief in, you know, being able to communicate, you'll always be employed. But my trouble is I can't imagine where that next thing is, or I'd go and do it. But these kids, that if you teach them that that being the innovator and being the ideas maker I think that's more interesting than going down the traditional, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a dentist, I'm going to make things happen, I think is a great germ to try and instill in the kids. And I'm hoping that they're getting some of that.
So I remember when my daughter was a senior in Toronto, and I'd chat to her friends and occasionally the class and talk about what they were going to do. And they sort of wanted to go to university, didn't know what they wanted to do, you know, were following in their parents' footsteps, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, well, you know, why don't you think about bypassing university, get a good idea and start up something? And, you know, you've got enough rich friends here that can invest it with you and pass on, you know, their knowledge to you. And that was kind of like mind-blowing for most of the kids. No one did it, but I think you're right. That's got to be instilled into the kids somehow. Get out there hustling.
Yeah, the life, you know, the way that we're going to live and the way we're going to make our money in the future, I think, is changing pretty rapidly. There'll be some constants, but I think people who are adept and don't get locked into that I've got to work for this company for the rest of my life mentality are going to be doing better.
Yeah, I mean, it's different these days. I think there seems, with low interest rates maybe, but there seems to be a lot more money out there for people starting up ventures, just in general. That's my sort of, statistical analysis involving a sample of one. But also too, I think if I look back on my career, I mean, when I was at uni, I was holding down 5 part-time jobs, just hustling from one thing to the next, trying to make money. And even though I worked corporate for a long time, it was, you know, I had 4 or 5 offers on the go and negotiated, put one up against the other all the time until I got a good deal. And so, yeah, those kind of skills I think need to somehow get taught to kids at a young age, hustle and negotiate.
Yep, I agree.
And I don't think the education system is really set up for that. So it comes from parents or friends and family. You know, I think the only thing I've done for my boys is they've seen me out there having a go, failing most of the time, but out there having a crack. And, you know, I think they both went, well, if Dad can do it, then we can probably do it better because he's an idiot and we're a lot smarter than he is.
But of course, the example you give, Cameron, is that you show that if you put the work in, you get the results. You've got to find something that you're prepared to work at. You know,
in fact, I show that the opposite, that you can work your ass off and still not get any results. But the work is there. The work's there. I've been admiring your Instagram photographs lately. I figured this was your new career trajectory. You're setting yourself up as a behind-the-scenes photographer. Very artistic, your behind-the-scenes stuff at the show.
Oh, thank you, mate. I'm just a hobbyist. I thought that it was worth recording some of the final moments over at Willoughby. And you know, some great characters have been through that building, and a lot of them still work there. So I just wanted to capture some of the people that have been there for a long time, some of the fresher faces as well, and say goodbye to the old asbestos-ridden joint that
But really, I mean, I've been there at least once, but it's what a TV station should look like, what you think it looks like before you go. It's got a big aerial on top, big antenna, broadcasting aerial.
Yep.
The reception's full of photos of the celebrities, and you go inside and there's all these studios that are big and open and they move things around. Yeah, it's your classic old style, isn't it? It's not like you walk into somewhere today and it's a panel, like a desk with a couple of small cameras in front of it.
That's it.
It's a lot different, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and the cameras are robotic. The presenters are robotic. But from externally, it just looks like any other office block. It's a beautiful building, by the way, but it does look like a corporate block rather than a factory of dreams and magic.
Right. Yeah.
Before we get back to investing, I want to talk more about the sports business. I remember when we first had that first dinner that you were at early this year. I don't remember when it was, but it was just as the Rona was starting to kick in and we were about to go into their first lockdown. So it was sort of February, March. And, I know you were saying then, well, shit, what am I going to do this year if there's no sport? What have you ended up doing during the sport lockdown? How have you kept yourself busy?
Well, for 10 weeks, there was no sport anywhere in the world other than horse racing. Horse racing didn't stop, and that's a great tribute to Peter Velandia, who has worked miracles through these tough times.
Who's that?
Oh, sorry, Peter Velandia is the chairman of the National Rugby League, or the Australian Rugby League Commission. He's also the boss of Racing New South Wales, and he's a can-do kind of guy, and he can be a bit abrupt, but he's very clever, very, very clever, and very determined. He kept horse racing going. He just took the steps that had to be taken. Put the jockeys in a bubble. He isolated. He kept all the right PPE gear around. He kicked all the punters off course, and he just ran it in a bubble. And then he ran rugby league in a bubble when they said they couldn't do it. And by the end of, not by the end of it, but within a few weeks, the NFL was ringing him and saying, Peter, how did you do this? And, they've been less successul because they can't keep their $200 million players in bubbles. They just won't do it. Whereas we were more, I think, disciplined at realizing that we needed a team approach to keep things going. But for 10 weeks, we had very little stuff to talk about except when will rugby league be back? When will, all of the other sports, the AFL, the tennis, the cricket, when will they all be back? And for 10 weeks, thankfully, we made it interesting. And what we did find was one of the benefits was because people were accepting lower quality video output, like the Zoom meeting we're on, and we could just quickly speak to, a Manly or a Bulldogs football player. And because they were at home instead of in front of their teammates, they often gave us more in-depth answers and more considered answers, and we saw a more emotional and more sensitive side of their responses. So I think that part of it was really beneficial, but it's become a lot easier now that we've got real sport to talk about.
Sorry, after you go.
I heard someone who worked for Peter Velandia's interview, and they said, how did he do it? How did he get racing to continue, and how did he get the NRL to continue belatedly? And this person said, well, Peter always starts from the point of view of what does success look like, and then that you work back from there. And I think that's a really, really good life lesson. If you're in business, in any sort of endeavor, really, what does success look like?
Yeah,
define that, and then work back from there.
And he's fearless. He may have fears, but he never exhibits them. And you know what? I think he's quick to adapt too. When he knows he's wrong, he will acknowledge that. He'll give you your point, and then he'll work with that. He's not just a crash through type of guy, because those guys eventually hit a wall that they can't break.
And no one will work for them either. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, no, I've found the whole Zoom interview thing with the late night shows where they've been interviewing celebrities just at home, actually far more interesting and engaging. It's less fake. It seems to be more real. I actually wonder how that's going to change things moving forwards as I think the US is a long way from getting back to normal, but they are back in the studio, I think, some of them. But how do you think it's going to have, like in terms of long-term impact for what you do, has there been any positives come out of this that will change how you approach your job next year?
Look, I think the major benefit is that people are more accepting of lower quality material in terms of, technical lower quality material. That's a good thing because it makes us very flexible. It means that we don't have to spend as much money as we used to get stuff done. But, when it comes to actual broadcasting of live sports, you want that in your 4K HD, you want the best experience you can for that. So I think all those advancements are going to keep going, but I think it's still a little too early to tell if Zoom is going to be the be all and end all into the future, because I don't really buy into this empty city sort of philosophy that people won't want to come back into town and they'll all do their work from home. I think that'll drive most people nuts eventually. If you're a solitary person or comfortable in your own quiet environment, that works brilliantly for you. But I think a lot of people are more herd animal, more gregarious. They need the excitement. We've just moved into an open plan office, which I was dreading. Not because I wanted my privacy so much, but I just didn't want to hear what everyone else was saying or their conversations and stuff. But I found it to be so much more social and fun than I thought. It's energizing to be in those spaces. But you do need a hidey hole every now and then. And so I think, once again, sample of one, Tony, I think that, maybe the cities won't be as busy. The office blocks won't be as busy as before. They might be repurposed in some way. But I think people will still want to come back and rub shoulders when they can, when it's safe and they feel comfortable again.
Yeah, look,
I think,
sorry.
I was hoping you were going to tell me that our big plan for you and Tony in an Apollo tourism van driving around the country was the next step in the progression.
Mate, that's a hair shirt for you and for everybody listening, Apollo. I did make a list of shares that I've been in and out of since I discovered QAV. And CIA's at the top. That's a success story.
Yeah, it's good.
But Apollo was the next one that I got. And, I stopped going in and out. I just stayed in it for too long. But you know what? It's coming back. I believe in Apollo.
You're the only one who does. Sorry, Tony, I cut you off there. You were going to say something?
Oh, just about the CBDs. I mean, I was in Sydney CBD just before I came onto this call, and to me, it seems as busy as it always has been. And I think there'll be less people working in there because I think some people, have worked out they like being at home.
Yeah,
but I think human nature plays a part, and I think if I was one of 10 direct reports and the boss was in the city, and 2 or 3 of them started to go in to work with the boss and started to get a bit of a leg up because of that,
yep.
The other 7 would be in there straight away. So I think that will kind of drive people back to the city as well.
Yeah, and when you do your Zoom meetings and you've got the panel up there, you can't see who's off to the side and what the body language is. And you can't read the subtleties of the room. And I think that when you're making important decisions about companies and about your own careers, and you want to be convinced that you've got a good handle on things, I think face-to-face is the way to go.
Yeah, I agree.
So back to investing then, Cam. How did you discover QAV? Can you remember, and why? What were you looking for at the time?
Okay, well, every year in January, except next January, I go to the Australian Open, and it's 2 weeks locked in a hotel room. When I'm in my downtime, it's a time of reflection. I go down the road. I always stay at the same place. I go down the road, and I buy my new undies and T-shirts for the year. It's very interesting. But basically, I do reassess. It's that period after Christmas. I'm by myself, don't have the kids running around, and I do reassess what my targets are for the year. So I sit there in my new T-shirts and undies, and this year I got AirPods. So I needed to listen to podcasts because I had AirPods. And I found a murder mystery one that was quite good. And somewhere in the mix there, I saw this thing about how to buy shares at quality and value. And I listened to you, I thought you were kind of acerbic and funny, and I've changed my mind about that.
Which
And
one of us are you talking about? I'm not sure which
I
one.
thought Tony sounded like I kept waiting for Tony to tell me what he wanted from me, because I thought I'm a cynical bugger. I thought, why is he doing this? And as soon as I told my wife about it, she said, well, what's he want? What's he selling? I said, honestly, just listen to the guy. And you know what? The truth that comes out from listening to you guys is pretty apparent. You don't only have to listen to a couple of episodes to realize that Tony doesn't give a rat's if you listen or not. He doesn't give a rat's if you follow him or not. And he doesn't care what he says to people. I enjoy his interviews with other people that are peddling various products or ideas, because in essence, you boil most of them down, and it's nothing. It's just an idea, and they can't explain their own ideas very frequently. Whereas Tony can explain his, and I like the simplicity of it. And I did believe in it as a kind of, as the 10 commandments, but we've got about 30 commandments now. But I like that too. It's flexible. I could go on and on. I think it's a very convincing way to not just grow wealth, but to manage wealth in a low risk, low input kind of way.
Well, the big takeaway for me from that is that celebrities buy new undies once a year. I mean, I run mine down till, there's no threads left in them and they've fallen down. And even then I find it hard to give them up. So one day, that's on my bucket list now, is to buy new undies every year.
Mate, I do a lot of live TV, so you've got to keep your undies fresh.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, well, that's good. That's I think what you highlighted there is the big challenge with a lot of this. I think when I run Facebook advertising promoting this, it's always fun for me, the number of people that jump on the Facebook ad and go, "It's a crock of shit. It's bullshit." And I'm like, dude, have you even listened to it before you assume that? Like, well, but I understand it, because most people trying to peddle financial advice out there probably are full of shit. And it's how we differentiate.
I had a great idea of, I don't know how you go with Facebook, and they would be listening, so don't say anything nasty, but I decided years ago, and there is a company called PointsBet that has managed to achieve what I set out to achieve. I thought that the way into the freeing up of the American betting market, which from about 3 or 4 years ago looked inevitable, I thought I'm going to start up a podcast, not a podcast actually, but a Facebook page, an NFL spoof page, a funny page about NFL characters and games and personalities. And once I had, 1 million eyeballs, I would sell that information to an American bookmaker and take the trailing commissions from that, because it's a very successful model here, but too late to get into. So I thought, okay, the dominoes started to drop over there as far as legislation with bookmaking was concerned, sports betting. And we did get quite a few followers, but at one point Facebook just shut us down because of the whole fake news thing became important to them, and we were clearly stating that our news was fake and that it was a comedy page, it was a spoof, it was stated everywhere, but they don't reinstate, they don't listen, they don't reinstate. We tried to set it up with different credit cards and different different IPs and everything. They knew who we were straight away. It's incredible.
They shut down my Facebook advertising for QAV a few months ago, sort of leading up to the US election. And the reason for it, they said, was we were peddling something that was fraudulent. Yeah. And I responded and appealed and said, we're just advertising a podcast. Nothing, like no discussion, no right of reply. It's just they don't give a shit. It's frustrating.
There's got to be a better Facebook out there, because I know they've got that incredible first mover advantage, but it's such a clumsy thing to use. I hate it. I hate Facebook. I don't want people poking me and sending me reminders.
Well, to me, it's a failure of capitalism that there hasn't been a replacement. Facebook has been a disaster in many ways for well over a decade. A lot of people hate it. A lot of people complain about it. Where's the competitor that capitalism is supposed to provide us when there's an opportunity for a superior service? It's just not there because Facebook's got the thing stitched up, and I think there's too many venture capitalists with too much money tied up in it. They don't want to support a competitive product.
Yeah, a guy that seems to know, he says that if you spend a certain amount of money on Facebook advertising for your company, that you can consistently make a return of 2% or something. So if you spend, if you spend $100 million on Facebook advertising, you'll get 2% of that back as a profit, because it's just such a great engine, and it just spins off money. Well, maybe that's true, but it just doesn't. It's got nothing about it that is useful, friendly, or even just simple and easy to operate. I find the whole thing really headache-inducing. That's just.
And getting back to sports reporting, I think the big winner out of the Tyson fight was Snoop Dogg.
He still got it, hey? He was great.
He was great. I mean, you're going to bring a little bit of Snoop to your commentary from now on? Are you going to smoke up a little bit before you go on air?
I think that'd be fantastic. He's got those monologue things happening. I thought that the fact that he was doing that was a sign that it was all over for the dog. But he was great yesterday.
He was the best thing in the whole deal.
I don't know that it was great for boxing, the whole affair. I mean, they made a couple of $10 million each, allegedly, so they benefited. But I sat through it waiting for something to happen. Glimpses of the old guys there. I suppose there's money to be made in putting on these circus shows.
Well, I think part of it was the Jake Paul fight. For people who don't follow Jake Paul or fighting, neither of which I follow really, but my kids are big Jake Paul, I'm not sure fans, but they're aware of him, big YouTube star. And that seems to be a big thing. I think he was fighting a former NBA star. So this thing about people moving from social media to boxing is becoming big. And I think that's the next step for you and I, Tony, is we're going to put on a demonstration boxing match, you and I.
Fighting.
Yeah.
You should do it on a park bench.
So, yeah, I think I could probably take you, although you've got some height and some reach on me. I think I could probably, but I'd be too scared to hit you would be the thing, because you're the guru. So I think, it'll be interesting to see how the odds would come down on that one.
Yeah, I think you'd probably get the odds.
Until they worked out that I don't actually want to hit you.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, that's right. I'll frame a market real quick, mate. Tony's 100 to 1 on to win, because you don't want anything to happen to Tony.
Yeah.
So the next time we come to Sydney to do, Tony's in Sydney, you're in Sydney. When I come to Sydney to do our Sydney event, instead of dinner, let's do that. We'll do a boxing match, and you can commentate, promote it, market it, and we'll share the takings, the three of us.
Sure, let's do that.
And one of us will lay down when we know which side of the betting the money's falling.
All right, so let's wrap up with some investing wisdom from you, Cambo. What have you learnt over the last year or two in your own investing? Is there any pros or cons that you want to highlight for us?
Look, my dad was not a big investor, but he said early on you want to become friendly with a good accountant and a good lawyer, because those are the people that will help you make good decisions through the rest of your life. I've managed to do that, and I think that was excellent advice. And when I switched accountants, in my late 30s, the quality of my advice got even better. And I think I think that thinking you can do everything yourself is not clever. I also think that you have to be patient, particularly since, all of my investments early on were in property, and you don't see quick returns for them. You just have to think of it as a a slow method of saving, which will accelerate as time goes by. But when it comes to the share market, I was slow to realize the benefits of the share market, really, really slow. And I thank you guys for that, because I've just lucked onto a couple of shares in my life. I've lost a lot of money just punting on shares. And, you know, those are capital losses carried forward. So you can pick it up on the hurdy-gurdy. But I would say the thing is, get good advice, be patient, and, you know, only trust your instincts to a certain extent. That you have to really trust the quality of the people around you, because unless you're an expert at it yourself, you know, you've got to spend the money and the time on developing the relationships to get that expertise around you.
Yeah, I agree. What about the show? Any suggestions for changes? What do you like? What don't you like?
Look, my irritation with this show, if I was watching this show, would be that we haven't been very specific about investing. I think that that so long as the overall tenure of the show is pretty hardcore about its investing, and not assuming that everyone knows everything, and explaining in detail stuff that you're talking about, I think you guys are on a long-term winner, because anyone who goes back to the start of the series and learns the method can grow with you guys, and you see it happening. You know, I've been only with you for a year, but you can see the growth happening compared with the index. And I think that the one thing that I struggle with is I'm no good at the spreadsheets. So I rely on updated spreadsheets to see where you guys are at. And I guess, you know, feeling like that I now grasp what your concept is, I reckon that a vast lot of the value that I get for spending my subscription is to get those spreadsheets.
Yeah, okay. That's a good point. We're not trying to give tips, but hopefully and the buy list is reasonably long, so you couldn't buy all of it. So hopefully it's a kicking off point for you to do your own investigation.
Well, and that's what you've ignited in me. And so the timing was good with COVID. Everyone had a bit more time. And I've enjoyed investigating the shares that are on your list. And, you know, I don't have to go broader than that list to find something that I feel that I might be interested in. And if it's not, if there's no buy signal there with the 3-point line, I won't buy it. And I'll go and look at another one. But I don't necessarily, you know, adopt everything that you're doing. It's just an excellent guide. Excellent guide.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Now, do you have any broadcasting tips for a novice podcaster like myself?
Mate, I was just looking at my background here. I've got up my background game. No, I think the ultimate thing about broadcasting is be true to yourself. What you could do, and immediately, and everyone makes this mistake, is get a stand to hold your laptop so that we're not looking at you. You're not looking down like this.
Yep. Okay.
So if you put it up level, already you're 100% looking better.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And looking at your background, it's pretty good. You got a framed copy of a Winx jockey's jersey there.
Yes, that is a copy. I'm good mates with Chris Waller.
Oh, really?
And I don't have it here with me, but I'm going to have it added to that thing. I just bought that at a charity night, but I've got Winx's racing plate from the first Queen Elizabeth Stakes she won.
Wow.
Obviously, she had 4 plates on that day, but I've only got one.
Do you have any horses with Chris?
Yes, I have. Yeah, only the one. He keeps telling me he's going to find me the one, but it was he likes all these French imports, and I did have a horse called Studio with him that had 4 starts out here for 4 wins, but it developed breathing problems, so he had to be retired. But if you've got time for one losing story, this is why I've given up all my horse investments until Chris finds the one. And Guy Mulcaster will probably be the guy who does that for him. He's a great selector of horse flesh, as you know. But I had a horse in France, a share of it. My sister bought a share in a horse in an auction. The next day, the OTI, the managers of the syndicate, rang her and said, I'm sorry, that horse that you bought has expired overnight. It was dead when we sold it to you. It died in the paddock, right, during a storm. But what, you know, we can give you your money back, or you can take a share in another horse, which we say is not as well bred. It's a 2-year-old. It's an athletic type, but it's underframed, and it's a rig, which for Cambo's convenience is that the horse's testicles hadn't dropped. So all in all, it seemed like a pretty useless horse, but she kept that share in it because the money was for a charity, and it was called Prince Lottewig, and she asked me to watch its first race, and after its first race, very, very handy race in a midweek in France, I rang up into OTI and said, can I buy a share in it? So I bought 10% as well. And anyway, to cut a long story short, it used to have, we win, they win against a horse called Wildgeist, which went on to win the Arc de Triomphe. And it finished up being, its last race in France was in the Criterium du, whatever it's called, anyway, de Saint-Cloud, Criterium de Saint-Cloud. Anyway, every horse in that race, ours led them up for 200 metres on a heavy tan for 1,800 metres in a 2,000 metre race and finished 6th. Wildgeist won the race. The horse that ran a long way last was Rekindling, which won the Melbourne Cup. The Caulfield Cup winner was in there as well. All of those horses have won either derbies or raced and won in America. Ours was the one that it went into its spell as the second favourite for the French Derby, and came out of the spell a timid, frightened horse. I'm going to go back one day with a little budget, and I'm going to do a little, just to satisfy my own curiosity, I'm going to do a documentary, Finding Prince Lottewig, because he got lost somewhere. You know, they'd sent him up to the bush or up into the forests of northern France for a spell, and he came back a different horse. So, the trials and tribulations of horse racing.
Absolutely, yeah. We have most of our horses with David Hayes, or at least Ben and Tom Davidig now.
Yeah.
But I did sit next to Chris Waller on a flight back from Melbourne after Stakes Day last year, so we had a good chat about things.
Yeah.
And we might hook up at some stage.
He's a wonderful man.
Very knowledgeable.
Story. Yep. Yeah. Very good bloke.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Well, it's great to talk to you.
Yeah,
thanks, Cameron.
Most of that out, Cameron.
No, that was all good stuff, man. Thank you so much for taking time out of your studio day. You got to go back now?
Yes. Put the tie back on, and 6 o'clock news beckons.
All right. Thanks for giving us some time. That was a great story.
Oh, thank you very much. You've got a true believer here. Cameron, you were going to tell me where I rank in the first adapters to QAV.
I looked it up. You're roughly number 60, Cam.
Oh, right.
So
Okay.
Not bad. First century in there.
Yeah, you should have some caps made up for the first century.
Okay, I'll get that organised before our next Sydney event. Thanks, mate.
All right, mate. See you later, guys.
Cheers,
Bye.
Cam. Bye.